And we're back at the program. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here at the Pop Culture Cosmos. We want to thank you so much for listening. And he is back again. A good man indeed. You got to go ahead and check out what he's doing today, wherever you get your podcasts, at the Bar Talk Podcast, because they talk around the bar at the Bar Talk Podcast. It is a good man. I'll tell you what, I'm so happy he's here because we're going to be talking pro wrestling and the best of for 2020. I've been excited for this conversation for quite a long time. We've been trying to have some scheduling issues back and forth. Plus, also, I think that got him some extra time to go ahead and make sure his list, which I will go ahead and critique heavily. Actually, no, I'm just going to go ahead and say, yes, you're the man, or, yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But it is Ryan Jon Tombasco, and I'll tell you what, Ryan, just great to have you back on the show. Again, check out the Bar Talk Podcast. But he's here today to talk pro wrestling. And Ryan, again, it's just a pleasure having you back on the program.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Gerald. It always is.
All right, so we're talking pro wrestling, and it has been an interesting year for pro wrestling.
Yeah, very interesting.
WWE did not stop, no matter how hectic or now how bad it got with the coronavirus, because they had some, some investors to please and some type of revenue to generate always there. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of questions on whether or not they should have, in hindsight, put people at risk like that. I think that will always be a debate going forward. Some other organizations, smaller organizations, did close temporarily for several months. Some have yet to reopen. We still see a lot just starting up right now. But Impact tried to go ahead and make a go of it. Ring of Honor's just getting back. NWA still is up in the air. New Japan is obviously trying to do something at this point in time, and even trying to run house shows as well. So everybody's trying to do their own thing. And obviously the rise of All Elite Wrestling to a major competitive status, not necessarily head-to-head, as I talked about last week with John Orlando from the PVD cast, where we talked about how high is AEW right now, but they're there. They're getting close. They're in the ballpark. 800,000 viewers. Yeah, 800,000 viewers right now in their latest outing, and I think it's something that a lot of people have to take interest in. But I want to hear your thoughts, my friend, on professional wrestling for 2020. Was it a good year or a bad year for the industry as a whole?
Well, I think 2020 was absolutely a make or break year for the industry. And I'll tell you what, there was a lot of wrestlers that kind of rose up to the occasion, and especially having quiet arenas. There was a lot of different wrestlers from different organizations that rose to the occasion and really helped bring that sense of passion and doing a lot better character work, because there's no audience to hide behind them as far as reactions.
Absolutely. And it's a little bit harder for, like you said, the performers themselves, because it's little to go off of to get that extra drive, to get that extra oomph right there for you when fans are cheering, because there are no fans cheering, just a bunch of screens looking back at you. So it's really paramount to be a great performer in this business, because it sticks out even more when you're not a great performer in this business. So I see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's been showing and sticking out more like a sore thumb in this year more than most. So I want to go ahead and say right now that you've got a great list from what you've kind of gone ahead and told me in generalities. You haven't told me any real specific names, any specific matches, but I know you got a list of best wrestlers, best tag teams, and best matches that you want to talk about for today's interview. So I give the floor to you. I will interject on occasion, as unfortunately I do all too often, but I will try to be respectful as I can. But you know me, I think I'm going to go ahead and say a word or two otherwise from time to time.
Oh, you'll be just fine.
Okay, sounds good. But your list, my friend, on to your list.
All right, we'll start out with a top 10 wrestlers of 2020, and my number 10 pick comes in from New Japan Pro Wrestling, Minoru Suzuki. Some of the matches he had with Ishii and Ibushi, especially with New Japan kind of being somewhat destructive with how they were booking their higher tier matches. They didn't touch Suzuki much in the mid card where he's been working. But a lot of his work has been like A+ stuff this year. I don't know if you've gotten the opportunity to watch.
He had a great match in October with Okada.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. His in ring work is phenomenal. He's a very very good worker. He could, very passionate. Uh, there's a lot of New Japan people I didn't actually include on this list because of the aforementioned, at least in my opinion, destructive booking they've been having. A lot of that may have had to do with the pandemic, not being able to run certain storylines the way they would have liked to. But that's my number 10 pick.
Okay.
My number 9 pick is coming out of WWE, and it's Asuka. Uh, man, she didn't have a lot of brilliant matches this year, but her energy and charisma were second to none.
Yep.
They
Uh,
didn't have a whole lot planned for her for 2020, but as
her
soon as she
first,
started,
well, I'll just say this: her
uh,
first 7 months were sensational, and she was my top wrestler of the year. The back 5 months, the booking committee booked her out of the number one spot, and I'll just leave it at that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, she was definitely a breath of fresh air in an empty arena era, hands
Absolutely.
down. Just the way she works. I think one of the things for me personally that pushed her at least into my top 10 was the passion involved with her promo that had to do with Becky Lynch's pregnancy, and just the genuinity of it. It's like, man, it was there. It was a very, you felt it. You feel Oscar when she has her matches. You don't just watch them; you feel them.
Absolutely.
You know,
And she doesn't have to do a lot of high flying. She doesn't have to do a lot
yeah,
of things outside of the ring. She gets it done and creates. So she's one of those wrestlers. She's a throwback, even though she has stated on the record that she didn't watch a lot of All Japans from the '90s women's wrestling or anything like that nature. She's a throwback to an era as far as in-ring mat work that she can get done, that's interesting, that tells a story, and that really gets it done. And she deserves a lot of credit for that. In fact, as if you watch her videos on YouTube on her own channel, it's so funny
mm,
because one of the latest ones where she rewards herself by purchasing Coke because she really worked hard this year. You know what? She
yeah,
did really work hard this year, and she
yeah,
was there for the company at a time risking her own life and risking her own health at a time where a lot of other wrestlers, and rightly so, and deservedly so, were staying home. And she was
yeah,
out there performing each and every week.
yeah. Absolutely. My number 8 wrestler, and we're going to be going back to back female WWE wrestlers, is Io Shirai. Man,
Excellent.
her matches with Candice LeRae, I believe those were in October. Uh, they were some good matches. Her matches with Rhea Ripley, consistent ring work, versatile.
She had one
Uh,
with Sasha Banks too, as well. That was really
yeah,
on TV. That was really, really good.
her triple threat match uh, for the In Your House pay per view. That one and the number one contenders match. It just shows that whoever she works with, even if they're people that have been with the company, whether they were veterans or people that were slightly green to wrestling in general, she just has this ability to elevate anybody she works with. Uh, it's just because of the consistency of her in-ring work.
No, that's. I
But
mean, like I said, it's her work speaks for itself. It's so beautiful to watch at times because of the things that she can do, as far as from a high end standpoint, as far as the high risk maneuvers and things of that nature. She is someone that I think has got stardom written all over her. It just depends on how far the WWE wants to take her and send her as far as it's concerned. But I really like the future for Io Shirai as well.
yeah. Okay, my number 7 pick, and this will be my third WWE pick in a row. And my number 7 pick is Randy Orton, just because of the way he's
Mm-hmm.
kind of reinvented himself this year. He came out of the Royal Rumble on fire. His Raw segments involving Edge and Beth Phoenix were some of his best work he's done, probably seriously 2011, 2012. His character work was impressive, and they actually used his slower style effectively this time around. They haven't done that in years.
That one I may disagree with you on because the greatest match of all time was nowhere near it between him and Edge. I think that was an overproduced nightmare. Some
Yeah,
of his higher profile matches have not lived up to any type of expectations heading into it. I think that, like you said, he did reinvent his character, and he does that from time to time. Still, is not the most charismatic individual, so it's hard for individuals like myself to get behind him. but he did go ahead and make himself prominent. Whether it's not because of him or the fabulous new contract he got from the WWE, that's either which
Hmm.
way, because the WWE is probably giving him one of his final contracts of his career. I guess it's a
Yeah.
multi-year deal, but I think that he played himself again into a prominent role with the WWE and obviously on Raw and now SmackDown first, but on Raw now. That, yeah, I guess he was there out there. It's just his work rate, in ring rate. I still think it's there. It's solid, but it's unspectacular. And in a showcase match, it's hard to go ahead and have him. It's really hard to have him go ahead and give you that extra oomph because he's just so, like you said, methodical. He's
Yeah.
so deliberate in his motions and his moves that when you have a showcase match like the greatest match of all time, and even the follow up matches that he had in high profile matches, it's really hard to showcase anything spectacular from him because he doesn't do anything spectacular.
Yeah. Oh, touche on that. I picked him more because of his character effectiveness this year was the biggest reason why I probably put him on there.
Mm-hmm. Like I
Okay.
said, I mean, obviously he was out there and again played a major role with the WWE this year. So I can't say I disagree with you wholeheartedly on it, but it's just that I think the expectations on the greatest match of all time is something for me. I would keep him off the list.
Fair enough. Moving on to number 6 is going to be my first one on the list from AEW, and is another one that you might disagree on me with. I'm putting MJF at number 6.
That's low.
Uh, I have some reasons for putting him that low.
Well, I wouldn't put him much higher, but I would that's in and around the range. For me, I'd say that's right around there. You know what? On second thought, that's right around the range. 4, 5, 6 would be for me.
I have one singular reason why I put him at number 6, or even on the list to begin with, because I was considering putting him on a breakout star for 2021 list instead, but decided not to. His in-ring work surprised the hell out of me, because I thought he was going to be a lot sloppier than he was, considering how new to it he is, and he has that true full-time old school heel type feel to him. I think he's proven himself this year. He's a lot more than just good on the mic.
Yeah, he had a really great year. Obviously, his segment with Chris Jericho and the song and dance routine got the attention of the general audience, especially with the New York Times raving about his performance. He is the future of pro wrestling, rest assured.
Absolutely.
But the future, because now I think you and I are still disappointed the fact he wasn't given the title and given a title run. I understand.
Kind of.
I
I'm 50-50 on that.
well, I think the future is for him, but it all depends. You have to keep him strong. So we're going to wait and see him kind of on the fence on this current angle that he's in with Chris Jericho and the inner circle, where it's leading to. The goal should be to put him in the highest possible platform because, again, he is one of the brightest spots for your future. If you're talking about building your own homegrown stars that WWE hasn't touched yet or tainted yet, for lack of a better term, you got to go ahead and put him on a great platform. I'm not sure that they're doing it, but you know what? They're not. It's kind of like you said. It's kind of an unsure right now. We'll see what happens in 2021, but he has to be a big factor for them going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. My number 5 on the list is my second from New Japan, and that's Kota Ibushi. Man, what he can mold into any kind of character. His matches are very diverse. In my opinion, he's probably among one of the best all-round, like well-rounded wrestlers. His work again with the Golden Aces against the dangerous Techers, which would be Zack Sabre Jr. and I can't even say that. I'm not good with New Japan last names. That match was a freaking classic. His matches with Suzuki and Will Ospreay, in particular, were ones that delighted me to watch. Always a big fan of Will Ospreay. Is one of my personal favorites. But Kota Ibushi is probably sitting at number 5 on my list. Again, just because of his in-ring prowess, his skill.
Absolutely. Actually, an outstanding wrestler. I did see his match this year with Will Ospreay, and Ospreay, like you said, if he doesn't blow out something, he's got obviously a very bright future wherever he wants to go. And I think All Elite Wrestling and also WWE are keeping a close eye on his fortunes. But when you talk about what, obviously the great New Japan wrestlers that they have there, they're going to try and do everything they can to keep Osprey. But yes, he did have a great match against Osprey, and I look forward to more great matches. I mean, you could go down the list: Takahashi, Okada. You could talk about Naito. I mean, there's just a ton of great wrestlers right now
Yeah.
in New Japan that people need to go ahead and look out for, because there's a lot of great stuff going on there.
I'm going to be honest. I'm not sure Osprey ever leaves New Japan just because of the relationship he has with them, especially. Oh God, what's his girlfriend's name? She worked with All Elite Wrestling.
Yeah. I remember. Yeah, you told me about it. Yeah,
and she had left.
I've seen her too. I've seen the pictures of her too. Yeah.
Did you see the matches between her and Will Ospreay? They're actually very good.
No, I have not as of yet. No, I had to check that out.
They're pretty good matches. My number 4 on the list is probably going to be my most controversial pick.
Oh, here we go. Watch out.
And it's my first and only pick off of Impact Wrestling, and that's Tessa Blanchard.
The only reason I would say it's controversial is because the last quarter of the year, she was not available. But she did obviously have some great performances. I still am not a big fan of the crossover. I think she should have established her own self because she's one of the top 5 female wrestlers on the planet. I think.
Yes.
Well,
it was more the out of the ring problems she had.
Yeah.
That is what makes it controversial. Some of the things that she had said, and
I mean, did you like the crossover? Did you like the crossover and her getting the Impact title and becoming the Impact World Champion? Do you think it?
She not only became the Impact World Champion, she became the first woman to ever hold a men's world title in any U.S. based wrestling promotion.
Yeah, and obviously that's a very historic thing. I don't want to dissuade that or devalue that in any shape or form, but I mean, I don't know. Does it raise the level? It obviously raises the awareness for her, but I don't think she really needed it because she's just so good. And right now, she's the biggest free agent on the marketplace for any of these organizations once everything gets clear. And I know she's in Mexico and all that.
Yeah.
What does it do for the Impact World title? That's what I want to know. The long lasting.
Well, considering that the backstage, even all the male wrestlers were all for it.
Okay.
I mean, so they weren't against her having the title. It didn't lower wrestler morale backstage. So I guess that's a good thing.
I mean, for China, when she did the run with the IC title, I guess that's something comparable in a high profile format. So it didn't devalue that, and it didn't get devalued until later on with some bad booking. But we won't go there. That's another story altogether. So. I guess you're right. I guess you're right then. Although I'm assuming at this point in time, the current Impact World Champion will probably, I think that's Rich Swann. He will get defeated at some point in time by Kenny Omega when he goes a little bit more belt collecting.
Yeah, I'm thinking either that's going to happen or Moose will end up taking the championship from him, because I think that'd be a more interesting match having Moose versus Kenny Omega just because of the size difference.
That is true. That could be correct. Yeah.
So my number 3 on the list, and it wouldn't be any list without having Chris Jericho on it.
That is probably the most controversial.
The reason why I put Chris Jericho on the list is because he's been faithful to putting new talent over.
Agree with you. Sometimes not to the best thing. I don't think the issues with Darby Allin, or also as well with Orange Cassidy. Primarily, I think that's the one I would shoot to the most. I would not have done that. I understand he can stay.
No Mimosa Mayhem match.
Yeah, that's again. There's a point. There's a point to where you want to stop doing jobs when you're at the level that Chris Jericho is, and I think he went beyond that. I think it devalues him as a high profile. It doesn't as a personality, because obviously once he gets on the mic, he becomes Chris Jericho, but as a believable individual in the ring, because he clearly has lost a step this year. It's clear that he did not have as much as he did even in his days working New Japan in the past couple of years. It's obvious that he has lost a step. So I'm kind of, I don't know. That's a controversial pick. Chris Jericho obviously is credit putting him over, and obviously he's well compensated for that. And that's the first thing he would probably ask for the most. But some of the judgments that he made this year, I don't know. The MJF
Yeah,
is good.
I kind of like his creative. I personally think Jericho is a creative genius. Maybe I wouldn't have done a Mimosa Mayhem match, but the Le Diner de Borner I would have absolutely done.
Oh yeah,
That was probably one of the most comical segments for me in AEW this year.
oh yeah, I mean that worked. Obviously, getting the attention
And
of
who knew that MJF could sing?
yeah, and just it showcased. The idea was to showcase MJF in this whole angle, and the idea was him putting over. And obviously, he's had a lot of creative input into that, and to that he gets a lot of credit. We'll see where it goes in making and keeping MJF at a higher level for the future. But some of his choices in putting over this young talent, I'm not necessarily agreed upon on that because I don't think some of the young talent that they're pushing right now in AEW is deserving of that spot. I think Darby Allin is somebody that is got a future. I'm still not sold on Orange Cassidy. You're still going to have to sell me on that. I'm going to be very honest with you on that. But MJF, we've talked about before, and there is some young talent that needs to be pushed. I'm just not sure Chris Jericho and pinning him all the time is the best way to do it.
Fair enough.
Because he should still be a drawing card for you. And when you pin him time and time and time and time again, he stops being a drawing card. He just becomes another low-end novelty act, and that's not what you want out of Chris Jericho.
Well, they've been fortunate so far. They've been able to keep him still drawing. So
for now,
we'll see if that prevails if he keeps going in this direction.
For now.
My number 2 pick, another one out of WWE, is Drew McIntyre, who I think had an absolute standout year this year. I mean, even before his match with Brock Lesnar, but man, the pop he got when he bet Brock Lesnar, I think solidified him as a major face in the company, which was their point to begin with that. But his promos, his matches, he all works everything with real passion. You can see it when he's working. And there's just so many intangibles that he has. They're very hard to look past, all the intangibles that Drew McIntyre has. And he's been through the ringer. Look back to his 3MB days when he was more or less a laughingstock, and he left, he reinvented himself. He came back and he said, this is what I want. There's somebody that has a lot of passion in their career choice.
Just want to give a big shout out to Nancy Weems. How you doing, Nancy? Hope all is well, and Merry Christmas to you and the family. Wanted to wish you happy holidays. I know Ryan does as well.
Yes. Yeah, I talked to Nancy on Messenger quite a bit. Nancy's a throwback to the BDRS. She was always there. She's been with me from day one from Bar Talk.
Absolutely, and she checks us out as well from time to time, and we truly appreciate it.
Yeah, fantastic person. But yeah, your thoughts on Drew McIntyre?
Absolutely, Drew McIntyre, obviously being the WWE champion the Universal champion. They've got to get rid of this show champion. Combine it into one champion that goes from Monday or Friday and that can vend it on either show. Make it more enjoyable, make it more surprising to watch. But again, that's another soapbox I want to get to in another day. But yes, Drew McIntyre had a very good year. Outstanding wrestler. Somebody that is getting a lot of attention. Was given the top spot. And it's really hard to gauge. I don't think it was successful because the ratings are so down on Raw, and obviously him being a champion, you have to get some of the blame for that. But I don't know if not going back to him when there are crowds there is the wrong answer, because you don't know exactly how well he's going to do and how well he can perform as champion because you don't have crowds. You don't have crowds, and you don't really have any way to real gauge outside of ratings. And again, Merry Christmas to you as well, Nancy.
Yeah.
But I wanted to go ahead and say that it's really hard to gauge for his future. I can't say it was a huge success for him because obviously even though he was champion most of the year, their ratings were down most of the year and are really at that low numbers for the company right now. I'm going to say that his matches, his in-ring work was really solid and really, really good, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. His mic work is really good. And he's a really solid individual right now. And I think that they should go back to him as a champion at some point in time when they get crowds back, just so you can gauge exactly where he is as a personality, because you really truly can't right now in this year of pandemic. I mean, he's
Yeah.
been the one of the individuals that has been given a push in the middle of this pandemic that you really don't know exactly if it's true or it's not true, how long it's going to lay out.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think they do need to come back to it once they have audiences back in attendance. Um, I mean, he even when he was tag team when he came back with Dolph Ziggler, I mean, he garnered a reaction. Whether that was because of Dolph Ziggler or not, uh, who knows? I think he'll be able to do something at a higher capacity. You know, either whether it's as a heel or a face, I think he'll be somewhere in contention down the line.
Absolutely. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he has to offer. Again, Drew McIntyre is a top individual star. We're not sure though exactly, can he be that transcendent star? I'm not sure about that, but I think he can be a very good player. I think he can be someone you can lay a championship on in the future going forward, and the people will support him. I'm not sure if he gets you and brings in new fans and becomes that dynamite or individual that you sorely need. In fact, as we've talked about before, I mean, pro wrestling as a whole needs that one dynamic individual to come across, that one transcendent individual to come across. I'm not sure we have it. If we do, it's probably going to be three letters, MJF. I think that's the closest thing that we could have going forward. But right now, I think we're just in a wait and see, a pattern
Yeah.
mode where we're just, just I guess standing pat until crowds come back to see whether or not
Yeah.
individuals such as Drew McIntyre can take it to that next level.
Okay. And my number one on the list, I'm not sure if you're going to agree with this one either. You might, but you might not. My number one on the list is Jon Moxley.
Yeah, he did have
Now,
the AEW tie, and as a presence, and as a camera, and as an on-mic personality, obviously is deserving of to be in a top 10. His matches were a largely one note as far as brawling, and if you're into that, and I am into that, I could see that on a technical aspect. He had a lot of exciting matches. And whatever happened to Terry Funk? Terry Funk is probably still doing a retirement match somewhere on this planet. He's only done
probably.
1,500 of them. So I will say this, though, that when it comes to, Jon Moxley, obviously he is deserving of a place in the top 10. I don't know where. I wouldn't put him that high simply because of the fact that his matches, were good, but not at that level that's higher than, let's say, Okada. That's higher than, let's say, Osprey. That's higher than many of the New Japan or some of even the WWE wrestlers. Like I would put, well, actually in all elite wrestling, I would put right now Cody Rhodes ahead of him on
I
that.
thought about putting Cody Rhodes at the number one spot. I thought about Kenny Omega, Cody Rhodes, Rhea Ripley was maybe on my list somewhere. Adam Cole was maybe on my list somewhere.
Oh,
Nick Al.
did you see that from Nancy? Her latest post. She said her late husband was in the ring with him one time.
Nice.
Very nice. Go ahead. You're
Uh,
saying. I'm sorry.
I had Nick Aldis on the list, Kento, Okada, Eddie Kingston. I had on the list as a possible in my top 10. Will Ospreay, Bray Wyatt, even. I had them all as honorable mentions. I ended up deciding on Moxley because you pretty much what you see is what you get. You know, you look at him, what you see, you're getting exactly what you see. He walks a very fine line between face and heel. And I don't think anybody has done it as well as him since Stone Cold Steve Austin. I don't think I see a striking resemblance in character build between the two of them. I personally don't think anybody has walked that line as well as him since Steve Austin.
Okay.
And that's a pretty big statement to make. But he's been so consistent with it. And he hasn't veered from it since leaving WWE. Even while he was in WWE, the fans saw him for who he was. You know, they didn't cheer him when he was a face. They didn't boo him when he was a heel. And he walked that fine line. He stuck to it, and he still does. And I think that's kind of what sealed him in at number one for me. Is he feels like such a throwback, but he's new. You know, he's not trying to copy anybody, but he feels like he almost has that feel like he is, and I love that. I think
He
he's been absolute fire all year.
he had a really strong year. I mean, when you're AEW when you're All Elite Wrestling champ for almost the entire year, obviously he deserves a lot of credit for that. And I think that he would be deserving to be on anyone's top 10 list. I wouldn't make him number one personally, just because I don't think his matches were good, but his matches weren't great for the most part. And I think that's something that he never really kicked it up a notch on that end. But obviously, the fact that he could garner in fans, that he could garner in an audience with the television, getting eyes on him. Obviously, his promos were outstanding this year. I think that's the best year of his career on a promo sense. So from that sense, would put him somewhere in my top 10. I'm just not sure if I would put him again, like above an Oscar, above Tessa Blanchard for most of the year. Like I said, Tessa Blanchard,
Yeah.
like you said, is someone that for 3/4 of the year was one of the top individuals on the planet. So she gets a lot of credit. I mean, there's individuals like obviously Kazuchika Okada. I mean, the guy just,
This was a great year for wrestling. This list
yeah.
was very difficult to make.
Yeah, I don't think there's any one individual that stood out above the shoulders. I think Asuka had it one time, and like I told you, but it's no longer there.
Yeah.
I think she's now in the top 5 for me, but not. She's on the back end. She was supposed to be, like I said, doing so well, but unfortunately things got off there. But Okada, again, there's so many individuals out there that could be high on this list, but I don't think there was anyone that stood out head and shoulders as a number one wrestler that stood out, that had the whole gambit of great interviews, great matches, and great overall presence. And again, it's so hard to gauge because there's nobody watching live. And when you're doing that, it's really hard to gauge. So I'd say that's a very fine list you have. And putting Jon Moxley at number one for you, I don't say that. I can't say you're wrong because, again, when you're AEW champion on a show that has garnered and increased viewers after hitting a low early on in the year and built up a better audience, and he was part of that, I think he gets a lot of credit for that.
What's interesting, and if we start moving on to the top 3 matches of 2020, there's only one wrestler that's in all of those matches that even made my top 10 wrestlers of 2020 list.
I had a feeling you were going to say that because there are some surprises, I think, that are going to be out there for some people. But there was one match in particular that I truly loved. I think you're going to mention that did not feature two of the top 10 wrestlers on the list. So I understand that. So I had a feeling when you mentioned that. Yeah, that's going my way as well. So I want to hear your thoughts on. Did you want to go to tag teams first or best matches first?
Whichever you'd prefer.
Let's go tag teams. Let's say the matches for last. Let's go for tag teams. What are your best tag teams for this year?
Number 5, I have the Young Bucks sitting at. Most of my tag teams, and I've watched. I mean, New Japan doesn't have a ton of tag team. I mean, they do, but as far as high profile ones, they don't have a ton. You mostly have Impact, WWE, AEW to look from for most tag team matches, and 4 out of 5 of my tag teams are sitting in AEW because I think they do it so much better. So sitting at number 5 is the Young Bucks for me. Mostly because of some of their matches they've had, especially with FTR, with Hangman and Kenny Omega, and they were 5-star matches. They were excellent matches. There was a lot of storytelling in them. So while mentioning FTR, they're number 4 on my list.
The only reason I wouldn't put them on the list, I would make them a close number 6, is the fact they didn't wrestle as much as they did in a normal year where they're working the indie circuits and whatnot, where they're blowing up everywhere. I know their matches in PWG are outstanding, and obviously the work with Japan before previously was great as well. I would put them very close. I would put them either 5 or 6 for me, but I get that. Like I said, if they would have just had a little bit more wrestling, and obviously they've got a lot on their plate because they're helping run behind the scenes at AEW, so their plate was pretty full this year. And now that they're having their run as tag team champions, we'll see where that goes for 2021. I would put them right there. The only reason I would keep them off the list was because of the fact that they didn't have enough matches compared to some of the other tag teams you might put on the list. But I think they're right there. I think they had the great matches, just not enough of matches, I'd say.
So my number 4 on the list is FTR, Dax and Cash. They almost didn't make my list at all, just because of how anticipated they were to come in. And it kind of felt lackluster coming in.
I agree with you.
But I think that's more because of their wrestling style. They're not a new high flying, fun to watch team. They are the epitome of what an '80s tag team was.
Jim Cornette.
Yeah, they were good. They're good though. I like them. I like Tully Blanchard partnered with them. I think that was a good move. I usually don't like managers, but I think him being paired with FTR was pretty much a perfect fit. I
Uh,
didn't like Tully Blanchard with Sean Spears. I just felt it didn't feel organic, you know.
yeah, and obviously with Jake Roberts there, I'm not exactly seeing him in such a health state of mind right now. I don't know. His state of health right now is very concerning to me, and to have him out
Yeah.
there with Lance Archer, yeah, he still can cut a great promo, but I would be concerned right now. Having him there is just, I don't know. Arn Anderson with Cody Rhodes. Cody doesn't really need it. I don't
No.
understand the thought process on that one. I
I
mean,
think the most of the thought process was Cody Rhodes. The character he plays has a pretty hot head, and I think Arn Anderson was there to kind of cool that off.
yeah. Uh,
I'm pretty sure that was the thought process.
well, it's still. I mean, it's worked for a couple angles and whatnot, but I'm not sure if it's
Yeah.
great for overall because Cody Rhodes stands out on his own. But I agree with you with Tully Blanchard being a good fit for FTR. FTR is a very solid in-ring tag team. They just don't push the needle for a lot of new fans, and I can see that because they're
Yeah, they're
so
not
old school.
flashy.
Yeah, they're
Yeah, they're
not
not. They're not
flashy.
they don't have that pop and flash, you know.
It's different with Asuka because you mentioned all the stuff that she does outside the ring and all the stuff that she does inside the ring, inside the mat, that does work and does get over. And her style, even though it's in ring base, it works so well. But she's like FDR in that she's very ground based. But whatever she's doing right, FDR I don't think is following in that footsteps. I think FDR just
No.
has this basic style that's set in the 80s that a lot of people would say would want to stay in the 80s. I like it, but I don't like it enough
Yeah.
to make my top 5 list either.
My number 3 on my list is the only one on there that's not AEW, and that is the Undisputed Era. Because you can't have a top 5 list without the Undisputed Era.
There you go.
You can't. It's not possible.
Yeah, they've done a great job this year for NXT.
Man, they've done a great job from the get go. Adam Cole, Bobby Fish, Kyle O'Reilly, Roderick Strong, and whoever the fifth guy is, I don't remember.
But still, you're right. They've dominated the NXT, and they've been keeping them alive. They've been keeping NXT alive.
When they first brought Undisputed Era, the first thing I thought was DX, and holy shit, does Adam Cole look like Shawn Michaels?
Yeah,
it's the first thing I thought. It's like there's the next Shawn Michaels right there. I think they need to be moved up into a bigger spotlight, although I'd hate to see them moved out of NXT because it seems like main roster ruins tag teams and factions. I'd like to see more of a spotlight put on them, though.
yeah.
They're huge. They would be DX level huge, NWO level huge if they let them run with it.
That's the problem.
That's just my opinion.
That's the problem.
And they won't let them run with it.
Yeah, that's the problem. We won't go there though. That's another soapbox for another day, and that would be 2 hours on that, so, at least.
My number 2 pick is a tag team that wasn't actually a tag team, and that would be Kenny Omega and Hangman Page.
I agree with you there.
Oh my god, do they work good together? And they have what, 2 or 3 5-star matches this year?
Yep, very good matches for them, and the dynamic that they had as far as from the beer drinker to the milk drinker, that dynamic.
Yeah.
I understand for a lot of people it brought Kenny Omega down, but I think it raised Adam Page up. I think it raised Hangman Page up. I think it really did his status more than it brought Kenny Omega down because you saw Kenny Omega is got that. He was given the green light to go ahead and get the championship anyways.
Yeah.
It was a very good tag team. They had great matches. Yeah, I kind of put Kenny Omega on the back burner a little bit by doing it, but I think it was better served to put Hangman Page in a better spotlight. What he does with it, or what AEW does with Hangman Page at this point, it's up to them. We'll see how well that fits. But I agree with you. That's a very good tag team, and they are deserving a place in anyone's top 5.
Like Hangman Page, he built a character this year.
Yeah.
And that's something that most other wrestlers can't say, either because they already have their character or just didn't do a good enough job storytelling through their matches. But Hangman Page, he built his character this year.
I agree with you on that.
So my number 1 pick is the Lucha Brothers. just because of the
Hmm.
just because of the pure fluidity of how well they work together. It's scary.
Absolutely. I hope they aren't broken up because lately they've been wrestling
They are.
apart,
Yeah.
and I'm not exactly thrilled with that. I don't think it's in their best interests, but that's my personal opinion on that.
Yeah. Honorable mentions: Motor City Machine Guns from Impact, Best Friends from AEW, TH2 also from AEW, The North from Impact, Street Profits from WWE, Grizzled Young Veterans from NXT UK. They almost popped the Young Bucks out of my top five.
Oh, there you go. I mean, again, with the Young Bucks, I think it's just a matter of I wanted to see them in more opportunities, and I
Yeah.
think that's the only thing for me. I think they were very close on my list, would be very close on my list, and definitely think that's something we'll look forward to. I know Nancy said get Kathy Long on for kickboxing. I'll see what I can do to get her on. I'll try to reach out. We'll see what we can do on that for you. But that was a good list so far for your tag teams. Very strong right there. So you've gone through your top wrestlers of the year, gone through your top tag teams of the year. Now comes the moment I want to hear from you is what are the matches that stirred your excitement as a pro wrestling fan. What were some of the best matches that you saw this year?
Okay, so my top three. My number three was actually a pretty recent match. It was the Omega versus Laredo Kid on AAA Triple Mania
Mm-hmm.
of 2020. That match was fantastic.
It was
It was
good. It was
fun.
very good.
It was fun to watch.
It was fun to
I
watch. I think Laredo Kid takes all day to set up his maneuvers, and I think
Yes.
Omega sometimes can take a nap in between them. So that's why I held it a little bit back. I mean, even the ones where he hits, that's the problem. When you take all day to set up your maneuver and that's the one you hit, that's the problem. Not the ones that you miss. Not the ones that you miss and the guy runs out of the way or rolls out of the way or whatnot. Okay, that's because you took so long. But when you take so long and that's the move you're supposed to hit on your opponent, that I find troubling. And I
So
understand these
my
guys. It
so
just doesn't look good.
my reason to have in that match his top three was more because of Omega because he carried that match,
Yeah, he did. He did. And I think
and
Omega did great.
it felt Kenny Omega in that match felt like New Japan Kenny Omega to
When
me.
well now you see him molding into that character. I mean,
Yeah.
he had the match with John Moxley and it was a brawling match, and that's something that you couldn't see his style yet quite well. It's almost like it was a styles clash per se, but he did
Yeah.
yeah. But it was still a pretty good match. But this is where you saw Kenny Omega really take it to the top. Guess what? Bruno's here. Bruno's here
What's
as
going
well.
on, Bruno?
Oh my gosh, it's like just a Big Daddy reunion here, right here or not. That's cool. Glad to have you watching, Bruno. But you have another couple great matches here, Ryan. I wanted to go ahead and make sure that you get it. But that was a pretty good match, like you said, from Kenny Omega's end. Laredo Kid, when he's not trying to go ahead and set up those maneuvers, he was really solid in the ring. And again, it was a really good. I don't want to belittle it too much. It was a really good match for me as well.
So my number two is the one that I think you were waiting to hear, and that's going to be Will Ospreay versus Zack Sabre Jr. at Rev Pro High Stakes 2020.
That's one of them, not the one. That's the one. That's not one of the one. Although Will Ospreay would be is my top 10 wrestlers of the year, I will say that. But that was definitely a great match. Definitely something that is something a lot of people should go out of their way to see.
Yeah, that's not really a match I could describe. You have to watch it. There's so much that happens in a short time frame.
Absolutely, I'm looking forward to it, seeing it again. But it was something that was really good. I also want to mention that there's a lot of good shows that people need to go ahead and check out their ways to just do a Google search and it comes right
Yeah.
up. Top best wrestling matches of 2020. I did that the other day, and you'll be surprised what you see because there's a lot of really good matches that you can see out there.
Yeah. And there's a lot of very tiny indie promotions that do actually host some bigger names from time to time that have some pretty good matches.
Mm-hmm.
So my number one top three singles matches is Okada versus Ibushi at New Japan Pro Wrestling Wrestling Kingdom 14 Day 1.
Very good match. Very, very good match. Enjoyable. I don't know, man. Once we get beyond 5 stars, now it goes 6, 6.5, 6.75, 7 stars. When we can get 9 stars, 10 stars. I don't know. That's gone crazy about there. But that was a great match. Not my match of the year, but it
What
was
was your
definitely.
match of the year?
Well, my
I
match of the
want to hear
year.
Gerald's match of the year.
My match of the year that got me the most interested, my match of the year that stirred the most emotions, my match that brought me back as to a little kid to watching every Saturday and Sunday. I think probably the best way to say it was the match that really got the most out of me as a professional wrestling fan this year was on NXT UK, and that was Walter versus Ilya Dragunov. That
That was a
match,
good match.
that
That was
match
a
had to
very
be.
good match.
That match was physical, more physical than any match this year, and more physical than any match we've seen in quite some time. That match was they beat the snot out of each other, and
Yeah.
that match it was truly something spectacular to see. That was my number one match. I know as well the match at AEW Revolution between the Young Bucks and Omega and Page was a great match. I know also as well the parking lot brawl match on Dynamite was a fantastic match and something that I really truly enjoyed. Even though I didn't like the ending of that one with Orange Cassidy stepping in, I still thought that was a 5-star match for me until that point in time. There were some great matches, like you said, Kenny Omega and Laredo Kid. I just wish Laredo Kid, there were some things that maybe could have been talked about backstage that I think that would have been better to make it from a 4-star match for me to a 5-star match. And then there were still, like you said, Osprey and Sabre Jr. Osprey to me, I think either him or Okada were my choice for Wrestler of the Year. And then, like I said, filling out my rest of my roster would be the likes of Sasha Banks would be on my top 10 list. Io Shirai would be on my top 10 list. Rhea Ripley would be on my top 10 list. Asuka is going to be there in my top 5 as well. I think they had a great year. I think also as well when you have, you have so many other great wrestlers that had great years. Like again, Okada, Osprey. There's so many great wrestling matches, even in a time and a period where we didn't have as many matches, period, overall, because of what went on with coronavirus. We still had a lot of great options.
Yeah, and you know what? The quality seemed like it was there more this year than it was most others.
Maybe that's a
But they,
better. Well, unfortunately, obviously, I would rather have the reverse and have a lot of matches and everybody be healthy and obviously the millions of people who've been afflicted by this terrible virus. I wish they
yeah.
wouldn't have been, but maybe the fewer matches means a better quality of matches. So I
Well, I
think
mean,
that's
it's less creative has to work on.
yeah.
I mean, AEW doesn't technically have like a creative department, but it's less for them to have to think on. It's less people in the shuffle. So it probably makes for a little better quality because you don't have as much to worry about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would like the opposite because that would mean a lot of people would still be here with us today.
Yeah.
So, but I think the pandemic did create the opportunity for wrestlers to get a little bit more rest in between matches, which may have created a little bit more exuberance and performance in the ring. But again, I like to have the opposite, that's for sure. But that was an outstanding list. Nothing short of an outstanding list by you, Ryan. And I cannot thank you enough for taking the time, almost 50 minutes in, to go ahead and talk about some great wrestling for 2020. But before we head on out, my friend, I want to go ahead and give it to you, hand it over to you. You host an awesome show, Bar Talk Podcast, which Nancy and Bruno know all too well about. But I want to make sure everybody else knows out there as well all the great things that you do with Bar Talk Podcast. So give me the heads up, man. Why should people check out the Bar Talk Podcast?
We talk a little bit about everything, Gerald. Things from I'll bring wrestling up from time to time on Bar Talk Podcast. We'll talk about newer happenings. We try and stay away from political things to try and leave everything a lot lighter and fluffier. So a little bit of everything. We're kind of a variety podcast. We did a lot about UFOs and stuff like that over Halloween. We kind of went on a hiatus. A lot of us had some personal things going on. So we're looking to reboot back up coming January 2021.
Oh, they're looking forward to that. Some great conversations, but there's still a library of great shows that's available on your podcast outlet. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, we have, I think, about 9 or 10 shows out. Yeah.
There you go. So please check it out today. The Bar Talk Podcast. It brings the spirit of Big Daddy, who we want to go ahead and say rest in peace. Just an awesome individual. So sad to see, what happened to him this year, but his spirit lives on in the Bar Talk Podcast and all the great individuals that support the Bar Talk Podcast. So please go ahead and listen to the back episodes of the Bar Talk Podcast and look forward to new episodes in January of 2021 with Ryan. I tell you what, Ryan, it's been great having you on the show again. I cannot thank you enough for being a part of it, talking some
It's been
great
fun.
wrestling. We might have to arm wrestle for the top wrestler of 2020, but outside of that, I do want to tell you it's just an outstanding list. Again, you kill it every time you're on the show. I'm going to have to get you back on to talk more pro wrestling and pop culture every time out right here on the Pop Culture Cosmos. And happy holidays to Bruno, Nancy, and everybody watching. We truly appreciate it. And thank you again, Ryan. And safe and happy holidays to you and the entire family.
You as well. It's been my pleasure being on.
Always a great pleasure having you on the Pop Culture